Hello my dears, and welcome back to another video where I, Horror Queen Cosplay, recommend a ton of spooky and autumn themed video games just in time for the season. Summer's over, so let's break out those witch hats, shake the dust off the skeletons in the closet, and get spooky. Somewhat cringy introduction aside, I really enjoyed last year putting together a video recommending various video games for this season, ranging all the way from truly terrifying to cozy and autumn and Halloweeny vibes, and I wanted to do another one. It's easy around this season to recommend truly terrifying AAA titles like Outlast, Resident Evil, Alien Isolation, but I wanted to shed light on some titles that you might not have heard of, ranging all the way from AAA down to indies. And if scary and horror is not your thing, that is perfectly okay. You can skip down to this timestamp below, where I'll be talking about the cozier and less horror-based titles that still fit in line with this theme and time of the year. And an additional side note would be that all of these games are available on the PC, and several of them, though not all, are also available on console and Switch. I wanted this to be an accessible list because yes, I know emulators exist, but not everybody really is comfortable with or can use emulators to play something like Haunting Ground or the original Silent Hill games. And yes, in September and October, we have plenty of amazing brand new titles coming out, such as remakes for Silent Hill 2, Dead Rising, Lollipop Chainsaw, as well as tons of brand new indie titles coming out like Zoocosis. At the time of filming this video, it is the very beginning of September. I couldn't quite wait to put out this video after I had already played everything I was looking forward to that was spooky in September, so some of those might have to go over to next year's video. It takes me a lot longer than I would like to put together these sorts of videos on YouTube because tragically YouTube and streaming on Twitch is not my #1 job, so I work with the time, energy, and spoons that I have. With that, let's get started on a bunch of really cool games. No major spoilers will be mentioned, however I will be showcasing some gameplay, but I will not be spoiling, rather encouraging you to check out these titles for yourself. Let's get started. So the first bundle of titles that I would like to recommend are Mad Father and The Crooked Man. These are very classic RPG Maker, pixel-styled horror games that I remember watching other YouTubers play when I was starting to discover YouTube Let's Plays all the way back when I was in high school, so yeah, well over a decade. As exciting as it is to play brand new titles, it is also important, I believe, to take a look back at gaming history. While these titles might have plot twists or scares that seem as though they've been done before, at the time of them coming out, they were truly fresh and unique, and frankly, even today in 2024, can still be quite frightening and spooky. Both of them can easily be played within a 4-hour sitting space, so great if you're a streamer, or if you just want to hang out with a friend and cozy up under a blanket together with some snacks. Mad Father is about a young girl whose mad father is a scientist, and the home that she is in is quite haunted, dare I say. And The Crooked Man is about a young man who experiences some horrifying moments within his brand new apartment, and it triggers him to go seek out answers elsewhere. Again, both of these are pixel-based horror, but they still have a way of building suspense and conjuring feelings of dread and terror, as well as having multiple endings to their stories. Next up, I want to recommend something that's a little bit more on the camp end of the spectrum, and that is Choo Choo Charles. If you love B-rated, just horrible horror movies with terrible acting, Choo Choo Charles is absolutely going to be your vibe, and I say this in the best, most loving way possible. Choo Choo Charles is about a... how do I say this? A giant tank engine train with spider legs. horrifying the first time you see it, and it sure is an interesting gag. It's another game that can certainly be played entirely in one sitting, and definitely leaves you with an open ending that you could certainly see more to in the future. Like I said, it is totally camp with crazy characters, wild voice acting, and just, wow, they're really doing this. With just a dash of monster horror, it can be fun, chaotic, and at the same time, pretty terrifying, especially if you're not somebody who is really more comfortable with playing super scary games, or is just kind of sort of getting into playing horror titles. This might be a fun experience for you. It also has a very interesting lockpicking mechanic and an ability to customize and level up the train that you yourself are using to take down Charles. Next up, let's talk About Elisa. Elisa is a game that just this year got a console port, however had been existing on the PC for quite some time now. It is a love letter to PS1 era style graphics and gameplay. If you're an Alice Madness Returns and Resident Evil person like me, you are absolutely going to love it. Explore a terrifying dollhouse, you get to shoot some spooky monsters too, and run around in a cute frilly dress. Elisa is definitely that perfect modern take on retro classics that are starting to come into surgence and popularity within these past few years, and it definitely was an interesting and unexpected delight, in my opinion. And if you are somebody who really does love survival horror games, you will be challenged with this title. It definitely put me through the ringer when I was playing it for the first time. Not for the faint of heart, but really great if you are a true retro gaming lover, but you want something fresh and new. Next up, let's talk about Little Goody Two Shoes, which came out in November of last year in 2023, so just after I had made my last video. This is another pixel style game, but something a lot more modern and has a touch of retro-y anime style graphics and animations to it. I love the character designs. You can even romance characters, uncover mysteries, and discover what's up with the little small town that Elise, aka Little Goody Two Shoes herself, lives in. It definitely has some spooky atmospheres and vibes, and a very interesting story that goes along with it. Like a lot of these other titles, there are multiple endings based upon choices that you make within the game, as well as perhaps which lovely young lady you wish to romance. It certainly has its dash of difficulty mixed in, and just has a very unique and charming style to it. It is connected with another title, Pocket Mirror, but can be played as a standalone and might even get you interested in that other game as well. There definitely was a wave of nostalgia for me watching a lot of the anime cutscenes. They reminded me of early 2000s and late 90s anime series that I used to watch a lot of, either renting it from on DVD from Blockbuster or watching at home on YouTube. The nostalgia definitely hit hard for me with this game, and I know it will only be a matter of time before I make a cosplay from it. It just has a very unique and wonderful anime thumbprint to an otherwise fantastically spooky and whimsical horror title. Next up, talking about another indie title, let's talk about White Knight. What makes White Knight so special is the graphics. It's a black and white style noir game about a detective checking out a haunted house. The graphics cleverly utilize lighting and messing with your perception in a very wonderful and unique way. And just like Elisa, this one has another very Resident Evil discover and go through and puzzle solve your way through a mansion filled with danger. I really have a soft spot for indie titles like this one, and as you can tell, other ones within this video that just have a very unique visual and different thumbprint to them. Moving on, let's talk about Visage, or Visage, however you want to pronounce it. A lot of people have called this game a spiritual successor in a way of Silent Hill PT. You get to experience and go through an anthology of stories that take place within the same home but different homeowners. There is an element that feels like House of Leaves and just how trippy everything gets. It is truly terrifying, and each section is about a 2-hour chapter or sequence before you can move on to the next one, feeding all into a very interesting horror experience. If you like walking around and experiencing spooky ambiance while solving puzzles and uncovering mysteries and stories, this is definitely going to be the title for you, and will provide you with tons of hours of content and enjoyability. Now, I know I'm going what feels very quick through these titles, but honestly, it's the only way I can ensure that I am not going to provide any spoilers to you, and I hope that I'm just tickling your interest to check some of these out. I'm also not sponsored by any of these games as well. These are just ones that I've played and really personally have enjoyed. But if you are an indie developer and you want me to check out your horror game, please do let me know. Wink wonk, wink wonk. Moving on to another indie title, let's talk about Slay the Princess. Thankfully, Slay the Princess has been gaining a lot of traction lately and will soon be getting a physical release come February of next year. It is a black and white style visual novel game, and it's something I definitely recommend to somebody who wouldn't normally pick up a visual novel. I know visual novels can be a little tough if you really don't want to do a lot of reading, or that's just not the style of gameplay that gravitates to you. But trust me, the voice acting, art style, and just general weirdness and wildness of the story is totally worth it. There's hundreds of different outcomes, tons of different endings. Just like the princess, it will sink its hooks into you and won't let you go. Will you slay her or will you let her go? Who's to say, but that choice is up to you. And the narrator is very insistent that you slay the princess. Moving on, let's talk about something on the other end of the spectrum, the Alone in the Dark remake. Now, my experience with the original Alone in the Dark games is playing maybe 30 minutes of the original 1990s version on PC, as well as maybe 30 minutes of the really, really terrible PlayStation 2 remake. This one, however, that just came out this year is everything I love in a horror game. It's got vibrant colors, plenty of mystery and things to uncover, a story that had me enthralled every twist after another, a house that shifts and changes and messes with your perception of reality. I was totally into it. It also has a ton of replayability by the fact that you have two protagonists. Like a Resident Evil game, each protagonist's story goes along through the main line. However, to fully uncover everything within the game, you do have to play it twice, once as each character, because each character will have differentiating experiences that culminate together in understanding the full story. It's got decent enough combat, and like I said, the environments are really where it thrives and shines. Definitely worth something checking out if you like to have a little bit of combat with your spooks. This list has a lot more indie titles than last year's list. Last year, I definitely peppered in a lot more AAA games, but this year's list, I really am highlighting a lot more indie titles, just like Killer Frequency, where you get to play as a small town radio host while there's a killer on the loose. It felt like a lovely blend of a traditional Halloween movie with Michael Myers mixed in with elements of Until Dawn, and honestly, because I'm such a lover of the Paynes Creek Killings, felt a little bit like the Paynes Creek Killings as well. You have to think really on the fly and make quick snap decisions to try and keep certain characters alive, because yeah, people are calling into your radio show with emergencies, and how you handle them will determine whether or not these characters live or not. And the more that live, the more you can understand and uncover the mystery as to why these murders are happening and just who that killer is. It has a unique cel-shaded graphical style and plenty of charm to it with the dialogues between several of the characters. I was hooked, I was enthralled. Please do not be taking a shot every single time I say those phrases, because it's true. I definitely did not want to set this game down when I started streaming it, and thoroughly enjoyed it. I thankfully was able to keep most of the characters alive, but oof, some decisions will haunt me, and I will definitely be replaying to check out the various endings in the future. Next up, let's talk about Signalis. Signalis is another game that you will definitely love if you enjoy Resident Evil style gameplay where you are maneuvering around and retracing your steps and solving various puzzles through a singular location. Signalis likes to play around with perspective, switching between third person and first person depending upon what exactly is going on in the story, and it does so beautifully. This is a sci-fi story with robots, but there is definitely far more to it, including a queer love story and just terrifying cosmic horror and implications. A small description of this game does not do it justice because it is wild, and the last thing I would ever want to do is spoil this story. Out of all of the games on this list, this is the one I would least want to spoil in any way, shape, or form. It's interesting, with also some pretty heart-pounding and tough boss battles. Multiple endings as well. One of the endings is even based upon how fast you can complete the game, so if you're somebody who likes to get into speedrunning, this might be your next little fun project or game to get into. Next up is Indica, which is a game that came out earlier this year, and another one that absolutely highlights everything I love in a spooky, creepy game. You get to play as the titular nun, Indica, who is possessed by a demon. And she has to deal with her faith while going on a journey, and also might try to get rid of the demon herself. It has an interesting backdrop of the Soviet Union to go along with it, some wild puzzles, some interesting little pixel gameplay that absolutely ties into the story itself, and overall was another enjoyable experience. I do definitely have a soft spot for possession style horror, especially in the way that it's utilized in books and video games as opposed to maybe TV or movies. And it definitely utilized this concept of demonic possession in a very unique way that only a video game can. Another newer title that came out earlier this year is Lazaret. Lazaret, however you want to pronounce it, another one where I'm stumbling through. But Lazaret is one where you have to explore an abandoned ship, and definitely played around a lot with sound in a way that messed me up a little bit while I was streaming. I was upset, I was tense. It plays into my personal fear of mannequins. Well, more so mannequins and statues in a horror setting. I jumped, I screamed my way through it, and is definitely an affordable title to check out if you maybe can't drop $70 on the newest video game. It certainly was an interesting horror stream for me to play on Twitch. And yeah, made me a little bit unsettled on several occasions. I do also find horror stories that are about abandoned ships or even just tales of real-life shipwrecks to be inherently fascinating. It's an interesting setting to heighten the stakes and the spooks and play around with metal clanging noises, and you had to whistle in order to figure out where certain creatures were in order to protect yourself. So having this very specific whistling mechanic was unique, and just make sure you're wearing surround sound headphones while you're playing this game. Just word of advice. Up next is Reveal, another indie horror title, and this is another one I really don't want to spoil. For me to talk about everything that's special about this game, I worry that I would have to spoil. It starts off as your very stereotypical, what you would expect, walking horror game where the environment around you is starting to shift and twist, and you have to deal with and uncover the main character's trauma. However, it utilizes this perception in this particular subgenre of horror games to the fullest to really, really mess with you in the final ending sequence of the game, and it does not pull any punches with the way that it handles the final plot twist. The main character once lived on a carnival circus and that influences a lot of the environments in this game, but don't worry, there's a lot more to it. And I wish I could really, really dive into it, what makes this game really, really stand out. But again, the last thing I want to do is potentially take away the surprise that may await you if you decide to check out Reveal. Alright, and now I have one last set of spooky games for you before we move into the cozier stuff. Now, I'm going to pair these two together with Vampire and Banisher's Ghosts of New Eden. Both of these games were developed by the same team, so it's worth mentioning them together, especially since Banisher's Ghosts of New Eden is their newest title that came out this year, and I absolutely adored it. I've since gone back and have now been playing Vampire myself, and can certainly see how the studio has grown and really honed their craft. In Vampire, you play as a vampire, a recently turned one, a doctor who through tragically upon his awakening of the undead, accidentally kills his sister through drinking her blood. Now, on a quest for vengeance to discover just who turned you and make sense of your new afterlife, you get to explore the streets of London. If you're a classic Bram Stoker Dracula fan, this will definitely be an interesting take and version that you might enjoy. Hits a lot of the same vibes and even references Bram Stoker's original Dracula title as well. Both of these games do incorporate multiple endings as well based upon your actions. You can certainly run amok through London, killing and sucking everybody's blood, or you can make conscious efforts to try and use your new abilities as well as skills as a doctor to help them and move towards a happier ending, so to speak. Banisher's Ghosts of New Eden is a ghost story where you get to play as two banishers whose job it is to banish the dead to protect the living. Mixing in with the time period of colonial America before, the revolution, it certainly adds an interesting atmosphere and vibe. I did thoroughly enjoy a lot of the creature designs and spooky reveals. It had a heart-wrenching story, and just like Vampire, the way that you deal with the people of New Eden and the surrounding areas will influence the overall ending of the story. The two main characters, Red and Antea, are wonderful and rounded out. I love not only their character designs and how well their combat skills flow together, but just the way that they spoke to each other and their relationship as a whole. While these two titles are AAA more action-y than they are spooky, they do still definitely fit within this horror, cool fall era and vibe that we are at this state of the year. And this isn't my longest list in no way comparison to last year, but I hope that some of these are at least a little bit interesting to you. Moving on, here are the lighter titles that I have to share with you all, starting with two Nancy Drew video games. I am always going to recommend the point-and-click Nancy Drew video games. I grew up on them, and they're still making them, and I love them so much. If you want a really tough puzzle game, check out a Nancy Drew game. These games will really, really test you. And the two that I wanted to recommend for this spooky season are a newer title, Midnight in Salem, and an older title, Haunting of the Castle Malloy. Midnight in Salem, you can probably guess what the premise is going to be. There's going to be mixes of the history of the Salem witch trials while trying to solve a modern mystery and trying to clear an accused character's name. With Haunting of Castle Malloy, Nancy Drew flies all the way to Ireland, initially to be part of the bridal party for a good friend of hers wedding, but the groom is suddenly missing. So, tasked off in this spooky, foggy dead of night, Nancy must seek to understand and figure out just where the groom ran off to, or was kidnapped? Who knows? Who can say? Except somebody who played that game, of course. Both of them definitely fit within the spooky vibes, and Haunting of Castle Malloy even had a few moments that had me jumping, but since they are more mystery and point and clicked, they fit a much cozier vibe and can be really, really fun and enjoyable, especially played with friends. For those of you in the mood to romance your monsters instead of fighting your monsters, Romancylvania is the game for you. You get to play as Dracula, a female or a male version depending upon your preference, and you join a dating show to find love. There's tons of monsters out there. There is a monster for everybody, and each one is definitely a great twist on a classical monster. There's a twist on the werewolf, the succubus, witches, you name it, and it's great. And as you can probably guess from the title, it has a Castlevania, Metroidvania style gameplay to it, maneuvering around side-scrolling action and platforming, but again, the end of the day, the point is to find love for Dracula based upon your choices. And it does have a unique element to the dating sim aspect. I play a lot of dating games just for funsies, and this one, because it's a dating show style, requires you to essentially eliminate characters. I get choice paralysis, especially with dating sim games and trying to figure out and pick a singular character to go after. This one really makes you think about your choices, and will have elimination rounds where you remove certain characters from the running, and really bracket style, tournament style, forces you to really think about which character you really want to smooch with and spend your time with for that true happy ending. And of course, like any choice-based game, there's tons of replayability with it to see various endings for various characters. It's fun, it's cute, it's got a little bit of humor to it, and is definitely the perfect romantic Halloween game you may play this season. Up next, let's talk about a shorter indie title that also came out this year, The Cauldron Kids and the Summoning of Mr. Vermicelli? However you want to pronounce that. Falling in line with the theme of this particular year's list, this is another pixel-style cutesy game, very cozy, where you get to play as twin sisters trying to turn their little toy frog to life, using magic from their mother, who is a witch. Plenty of charm and cute little mini games. I really did also enjoy the music to it as well. It was a very cute and sweet 2-hour game for me that also has different outcomes depending upon which twins you are playing during different and each sequences. Cute, sweet, and short, just like taking a bite out of a cupcake. I love me a nice little pixel cozy witchy game. Moving into another witchy style game, there's Witchy Life Story, where you get to customize your own witch and you move to a small town and must figure out what to do next. You come to this town essentially selling your wares and potions to help out the townsfolk. It has an almost Studio Ghibli or Ghibli vibe to it, and is a nice, slowed down, very soft atmosphere and relaxation to it. Beautiful illustrations, and you guessed it, a romance system! I love it when my game lets me have a romance system. And I am a huge sucker for its customization settings. That I love me a good character creator that makes me want to spend hours creating my own. Moving on to more potions, let's talk about Potion Craft. While Potion Craft is technically not a true fall or horror game, there is something soft and cozy about sitting by the fire and playing something relaxing like this. It has a warm vibe to it thanks to its parchment-styled medieval graphics and aesthetics, and is certainly fun and enjoyable. You get to play as a potion seller and create potions for your customers as they come in per their requests. And the core gameplay loop revolves around paths that you take quite literally through mixing ingredients within your cauldron. You have to get pretty creative with a lot of these ingredient mixings, and it certainly is a fun puzzle and is very engaging for the mind. So if shopkeep managing video games are your style, this might be the nice, warm, sit by the fire, put some plush socks on type game for you. If you like puzzle games, let's talk about Save Room. Save Room utilizes the classic Resident Evil inventory managed system, very much heavily inspired by Resident Evil 4's management system over all else, and creates puzzles out of it, trying to figure out how to organize everything into the inventory slot. There are tons of puzzles that will definitely keep you occupied and scratched a very specific section of my brain. You don't have to be a Resident Evil fan to like this, so you can enjoy one of the best, most satisfying aspects of a Resident Evil game without having a zombie come out and try to nom on your neck. Up next, let's talk about Monster High: New Ghoul in School. This is a little bit of a self-indulgent input for me. I adore Monster High, especially the Generation 1 for Monster High. Yes, there are multiple generations. We will not get into that, otherwise we'll be here all day. But I have a soft spot for Monster High, and Monster High: New Ghoul in School is the only one that is available on PC for anybody to play. All of them were pretty much DS and Wii exclusives. However, you can get this game through Steam. You get to create your own character from Monster High and live it. You don't have to be a huge Monster High fan. They certainly explain more than enough, and it has its own unique storyline with the characters and the student council for you to go through. There's plenty of outfits and hundreds of combinations you can make with cute new styles. And if you are a huge Monster High fan, this is the closest you're ever gonna get to a real immersive experience, feeling like you actually really are walking the halls of Monster High. There's a lot of attention to detail and everything flows together lovely. It's freaky, it's fabulous, it's Monster High. Now, my last two games are, of course, also of the witchy nature, and the first one I want to mention is Flying Neko Delivery. Flying Neko Delivery is definitely a rough title, but can still be fun if you're looking for a Kiki's Delivery Service style vibe. You play as a cute witchy cat who has to fly on a broom delivering packages. Some of the controls can be a little rough, so even if you're playing with PC, I highly recommend that you still use a controller, and it does have some very bright, vibrant colors, but is still overall a nice title and has a, if this is the style of gameplay loop that you like, can be worthwhile. Finally, my last recommendation is Cosmic Wheels Sisterhood. This is one of my favorite games that came out last year, and I talked about it heavily in my other video talking about my favorite games I played in 2023, but I'm going to talk about it again. You get to play as the witch Fortuna, who has been cast out and exiled from her coven, and in this game you must essentially figure out a way for her escapement while also helping her coven through a very difficult time. Get to reconnect with old friends as well as meet new ones, and build your own tarot deck. It's a very unique mechanic, and the cards that you create influence the choices that you are able to make in the game. And these choices and tarot readings that Fortuna makes influence all of the characters and the various endings that you can make. There is also an incredibly difficult choice that Fortuna must make at the beginning of the game with a behemoth, a creature who will aid her wish of escape, but in order to do so, she must give up something important to her. It's a heart-wrenching and beautiful story with some lovely music that personally now is part of my morning playlist that I listen to when I drive to work, and is thoroughly worth it whether you're somebody who likes choice-based games, visual novel-style games, or that's not your usual cup of tea. It might just interest you. It's definitely one of my favorite out of this list, and why I wanted to mention this one last, because it truly was one of the most special games that I played last year. So, with that, this is the end of my list of recommendations for 2024 autumn and Halloween-y spooky games. Please let me know if you've played any of these games, or if you plan to. Let me know your thoughts. Did you enjoy last year's video? You didn't have to watch last year's video to get into this one, but I do really enjoy making these and will definitely be making another one next year. I hope that at least one of these might be your next favorite spooky game. Thank you so much for watching and joining me, especially for making it to the end. This year in October, as always, I will be playing a different spooky game, both old and new, on my Twitch on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you want to check it out, I would really appreciate it. Either way, take care, my dears, take care, my darlings, and I shall see you soon. Bye!